Creating the paper template, we draw the eagle ray silhouette at its intended final size and create a paper template. This template helps us control the width, length, symmetry and proportions of the future lamp. It also gives us a clear boundary within which the master model will be created. At this stage, we can make changes very quickly. We can adjust the shape of the fins, change the curve of the front edge, enlarge or reduce the central body, or modify the relationship between the body and the tail. It is much easier to correct these details on paper than after three-dimensional master model has already been completed. Once the silhouette feels balanced, we cut it out and use it as a guide for building for the form from Plasticine. Building the Plasticine master model. The next stage is the creation of the master model. The master model is the original object from which the plaster mold will be made. Every future cast will reproduce its main proportions and surface, so the quality of this model is extremely important. We use sculptural plasticine instead of ceramic clay for this stage. Plasticine doesn't dry or shrink. It remains workable for long as necessary, allowing us to add material, remove it, reshape the volume, and refine the surface repeatedly. We begin by placing blocks or plasticine inside the paper outline. At first, the model looks very raw. The purpose of this stage is not to clear fine details but to establish the main mass of the ray. The plasticine blocks are joined together and compressed to remove unnecessary gaps. We gradually create one continuous volume that follows the pure silhouette. The center of the ray needs to be higher and fuller, while the fins become thinner toward their outer edges. This difference in height creates the impression of movement and makes the form appear more natural. Establishing the main volume. Once the initial mass has been assembled, we begin refining the overall volume. We work from the largest forms toward the smaller ones. First, we define the main body. Then we shape the broad fins and establish their curvature. After that, we develop the head, the front edges, and the transitions between different parts of the anatomy. It is important to evaluate the model from several angles. A form may look balanced from above but appear too flat from the side. One fin may be thicker than the other, or the central body may sit too high in relation to the wings. Because this object will eventually hang on the wall, we must also consider the depth of the lamp. It needs enough internal space for the lighting components and to allow light to spread behind the sculpture. At the same time, it shouldn't project unnecessarily far from the wall. We continuously add and remove plasticine until the proportions feel correct. Preparing the model for mold making. When the plasticine model is complete, we prepare it for the plaster mold. Before pouring plaster, we need to make sure that the form can be released safely. Plaster becomes completely rigid after setting. If the master contains deep undercuts or shapes that lock inside the mold, removing it may become difficult or even impossible. For this reason, we examine the whole model and correct any problematic areas. We then construct a retaining wall around the master. This wall creates the boundary of the future plaster mold and prevents the liquid plaster from spreading across the work table. The mold requires sufficient thickness to remain strong during repeated casting, but it should not be unnecessarily heavy. Every gap around the retaining wall must be sealed. Liquid plaster can escape through even a small opening. Pouring the plaster mold. We slowly pour the plaster around the master model. The plaster should flow naturally across the form rather than being poured aggressively onto one point. A controlled pour helps protect the plasticine surface and allows air to escape. We continue adding plaster until the model is fully covered and mold reaches the required thickness. At this stage, the plaster begins a chemical setting reaction. As it hardens, it becomes warm. This is a normal part of the process and indicates that the material is setting. The mold must remain completely still during this time. Moving it too early can damage the surface, create cracks, or distort the final shape. After the plaster has become firm and cooled down, the temporary retained walls can be removed. Removing the master model. The next step is separating the plasticine master from the plaster mold. This must be done carefully to avoid damaging the internal surface. The plasticine is removed section by section because it remains soft. It can usually be pulled, cut, and scraped away without breaking the plaster. Small pieces of plasticine may remain in detailed areas, so the entire mold needs to be cleaned thoroughly. The inner surface is the inspected. We look for air bubbles, chipped edges, small defects, or pieces of material that could interfere with casting. Minor imperfection can sometimes be corrected by hand. Larger problems may require repairing or even remaking part of the mold. A good plaster mold should reproduce the intended shape clearly and release the future ceramic cast without unnecessary resistance. Releasing the cast from the mold. After the clay shell has formed, the cast remains in the mold while it becomes firmer. As the clay loses moisture, it shrinks slightly and begins separating from the plaster surface. This natural shrinkage helps release the object. The timing is critical. If we remove the cast too early, it may be too soft and can easily stretch or deform. If it remains in the mold too long, different areas may dry at different speed and create stress. When the ceramic body is firm enough to support itself, we carefully lift it from the mold. The newly cast ray is still fragile, so every movement must be controlled. White fins and thin edges are particularly vulnerable while the clay remains soft. Cleaning and refining the ceramic form. The cast is only the foundation of the finished lamp. After removal, we clean the edges, smooth any mold marks, and repair small imperfections. The form may also be adjusted while the clay is still workable. We can change the curve of the fins, refine the silhouette, sharpen details, or correct minor asymmetry. This finishing stage is one of the reasons our cast objects still retain the qualities of handmade ceramics. Even when two pieces come from the same mold, the final shaping is never completely identical. The artist responds to each cast individually. Creating the light openings. One of the defining features of the Eagle Ray lamp is its pattern of openings. These holes are created by hand across the ceramic surface. They have both a decorative and functional purpose. During the day, they form a detailed pattern that emphasizes the anatomy and movement of the ray. At night, they allow light to pass through the ceramic body and project onto the surrounding wall. The position and size of every opening affect the final lighting effect. Some areas receive dense groups of small holes, while others may contain larger openings or more open spaces. The pattern follows the structure of the sculpture rather than the begin applied randomly. Because this work is done individually, every eagle ray develops a slightly different arrangement.
Bring me into golden sunlight. If I'm going with you, I know we'll get to the other side. Sinking in, I know this feels right. Catching a breeze, love moving through me like a wildfire, like a wildfire. Never the same.
Creating the light openings. One of the defining features of the eagle ray lamp is its pattern of openings. These holes are created by hand across the ceramic surface. They have both a decorative and functional purpose. During the day, they form a detailed pattern that emphasizes the anatomy and movement of the ray. At night, they allow light to pass through the ceramic body and project onto the surrounding wall. The position and size of every opening affect the final lighting effect. Some areas receive dense groups of small holes, while others may contain larger openings or more open spaces. The pattern follows the structure of the sculpture rather than the begin applied randomly. Because this work is done individually, every eagle ray develops a slightly different arrangement.